In this lesson, we'll be going over a brief history of cryptography. Cryptography actually goes back several thousand years, probably shortly after people began to find ways to communicate. There were some who were finding ways to make the understanding of that communication difficult so that other people couldn't understand what was going on. The Caesar cipher was developed by Julius Caesar, and it's a simple rotation cipher. And by that, I mean that you rotate a portion of the key in order to generate the algorithm. So here's an example. We've got two rows of letters that are in alphabetical order, means we've basically written the alphabet down. The second row is shifted by 3 letters. So A, B, and C from the first row get shifted to the back on the second row, and we start with the letter D. And below that, there's an example of an encrypted string. So I've encrypted the word hello, and in this particular shift, that translates to LHOOR. So with variable spaced fonts, it's harder to see what lines up right over another letter, but if you count the letters out, you can see that the letter H translates down to the letter L, and so on. So that's a Caesar cipher, and you'll occasionally hear things like rot 13, which means that you rotate 13 letters instead of the 3 that we've done here, and that again is just a simple rotation cipher or Caesar cipher. And that's what, of course, the ROT stands for, is rotate or rotation. Coming forward a couple thousand years, we have the Enigma cipher. Now, it's important to note that Enigma is not the word given to this particular cipher by the people who developed it. It's actually the word given to it by the people who were trying to crack it. The Enigma cipher is a German cipher. They developed this cipher and a machine that was capable of encrypting and decrypting messages so that they could get messages to and from different battlefields and war fronts, which is similar to the Caesar cipher. Caesar used it to communicate with his battlefield generals, and the same thing here with the Germans. You've got to get messages from headquarters down to where the people are actually fighting, and you don't want it intercepted in between by the enemy, so therefore you use encryption. And lots of energy was spent by the Allies, in particular the British, trying to decrypt the messages. One of the first instances that we are aware of where a machine was used to do the actual encryption. So we're going to come ahead a few decades now into the 1970s, where it was felt that there was a need for a digital encryption standard. Now, the National Institutes of Standards and Technology is responsible for that sort of thing, and so they put out a proposal for this digital encryption standard and an encryption algorithm. What ended up happening was IBM came up with this algorithm that was based on the Lucifer cipher that one of their people had been working on a couple of years previously in 73, 74. And they put this proposal together based on this Lucifer cipher, and in 1977, that proposal for an encryption algorithm was the one that was chosen to be the digital encryption standard. And so that became known as DES. Over time, it became apparent that there was a problem with DES, and that was it only had a 56-bit key size. And while in the 1970s that was considered adequate to defend against brute forcing and breaking of the codes, by the 1990s it was no longer considered adequate, and there was a need for something more. It took time to develop something that would last for some long period of time, and so in the meantime, a stopgap was developed. And that stopgap is what we call triple DES. The reason it's called triple DES is you apply the DES algorithm 3 times in different ways, and you use 3 different keys in order to do that. So here's how triple DES works. Your first 56-bit key is used to encrypt the plaintext, just like you would with standard DES. Where it changes is you take that ciphertext that's returned from the first round of encryption and you apply the decryption algorithm to that ciphertext. However, you don't use the first key to decrypt it because otherwise you'll get the plain text back. So what you do is you use a second key with the decryption algorithm against the ciphertext from the first round. So now we've got some ciphertext that has been encrypted with one key, decrypted with a second key, and we take the ciphertext from that and we apply a third key using the encryption portion of the algorithm to that ciphertext to receive a whole new set of ciphertext. Obviously, to do the decryption, you do the third key and decrypt it. With the second key, you encrypt it, and then with the first key, you decrypt it. So you do reverse order and the reverse algorithm at each step to apply the triple DES. So we get an effective key size of 168 bits, but it's still only 56 bits at a time. As I said, triple DES was only a stopgap. What we were really looking for was the advanced encryption standard. Once again, NIST requested proposals so that they could replace the digital encryption standard. In 2001, after several rounds of looking for algorithms and looking them over, getting them evaluated and looked at, NIST selected an algorithm that was put together by a couple of mathematicians. The algorithm was called Reindahl, and that became the Advanced Encryption Standard, or AES. One of the advantages of AES is it supports multiple key lengths. Currently, what you'll typically see is AES with 128-bit keys. However, AES supports up to 256-bit keys. So if we get to the point where 128 bits isn't enough, we can move all the way up to 256 bits of keying material. So cryptography has a really long history. Currently, we're in a state where we have a reasonably stable encryption standard in AES, but the history of cryptography shows that with every set of encryption, eventually people find ways to crack it.